everybody. This is the JavaScript Special Interest Group weekly meeting for September 1st, 2016. I'm Patrick Rogers, and I'm joined by Vesa Juvonen, and we are going to present this week's meeting. As you, for those of you folks that were here last week, we've changed the format up a little bit. So we're going to kind of go through that new format today with a little bit more emphasis on the SharePoint framework. Vesa's got a whole bunch of updates in that regard, a lot of exciting stuff happening there. So we've got our slightly updated introductory slide here about what's the JavaScript Special Interest Group all about. So with the release of the SharePoint framework developer preview, so not the full framework is out yet, but the developer preview has been out 2 weeks now, give or take a little bit, and a lot of folks are starting to get involved in that, starting to play with that, getting some good feedback around that. So we're going to start shifting a little bit more of the discussion, a little bit more of the focus of this weekly call to the SharePoint framework, which we were sort of slowly doing over time anyway, but that's going to become a little bit more explicit. And I think Vesa did a good job kind of explaining that last week as well. But we're also going to stick with the JavaScript core component is still going to be part of this story. We are still developing that, still actively involved in that. I've been a little bit away from that, unfortunately, but we'll talk about that a little bit here in this meeting and next steps there. And you'll see 2 links down there at the bottom. So we more or less officially now are off of Yammer. I think there's a 2-week stay of execution, but then it's going to move over to the network.office.com, but you can remember that first link there, the AKAMS SharePoint PnP community, will get you to the new location. So I don't think there's a ton of stuff over there yet, but we'll be shifting our focus there, and so we'll be doing our weekly meeting announcements there. And then, as we talked about a little bit before I left, and I think Vesa again mentioned last week, the videos will be going to YouTube. So hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier for folks to access that across a range of devices instead of just having to go to Yammer. And then we'll get the decks uploaded and linked out as well from each meeting, location exactly to be decided for that. And then as always, you've got our GitHub link to the repo. So if you'd like to submit code or submit issues or submit pull requests, or just check out kind of the source code for the library, do check out the GitHub as well. So moving forward, our agenda for this week is, again, talk about SharePoint Framework, latest updates. That'll be from Vesa. He's obviously super tied into all the new stuff that's coming, and so we'll get those updates there. Some updates on the JavaScript core component, sort of our reduced previous agenda. So we will hit the topics for the last time, sadly, Yammer and Gitter, and then talk about some of the next steps for the core component. We've got 2 great community demos, I believe, today, one from Bill and one from Waldeck, and so that's going to be really cool to see what both of those folks have done. And do want to mention again, if any of you on the call are listening to this in the future, if you're writing stuff with the SharePoint framework, hopefully you're using the core component as well, but not required. We'd love to have you on the call to do a demo so folks in the community can see the cool stuff you've come up with. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fully realized solution, but if you've done some cool stuff, just even just a little kind of a partial bit of code and want to kind of show that off, would love to give everybody who would like to the opportunity to demo their work on the call. So just get in touch with us through network.office.com or Gitter or Yammer for the next 2 weeks, I guess. And let us know if you'd like to demo. Definitely want to get as many demos as we can on these weekly calls. We'll talk about opportunities for contribution. That's related to the core library. And then we'll have a little bit of time there at the end for open discussion. So moving into the SharePoint Framework Developer Preview updates, I'm going to kind of pass this over to Vesa to go through these updates. And Vesa, I guess if you can just kind of hint at me when you want the next slide.
Yes. So actually, I didn't update the slide, so that's my bad. But let's walk through the latest status on that one. So right now, the SharePoint Framework tutorials are still live in the SharePoint GitHub organization. These will be moved to dev.office.com/SharePoint really soon. And I'm going to actually mention that on the following slide as well. The sample repository was actually opened up yesterday, so we do have a SharePoint Framework web part sample repository open, URL coming on the following slides as well. And we do have multiple PnP webcasts out. This week we released a webcast together with Wildec on the building of a SharePoint Framework web part using Angular 1.x, so how to make that work. And it's a relatively simple example, but that's also available from a GitHub for people to download and start using. Can you, Patrick, go to the following slide? So this is more around, here we go. So the new SharePoint landing page will be actually released today. So today means today in a PST time zone perspective, depending on where are you calling from. So relatively soon, slightly later than this call. So the SharePoint Framework tutorials will be moved to this new location. There's a nice typo. That's Finglish, not English. So the tutorials will be moved to this location. We'll update the existing, we'll add links to the existing location. And really the key advantage of moving our documentation to the dev.office.com is that people are able to do contributions as well. So all of the articles are visible, or the source of these articles are in a GitHub. If you find a bug, if you find an issue, if you if you run through the tutorials and something didn't work, let's say in a Mac or in a Linux platform, you can actually submit a pull request and say, hey, this node should be added if you're using whatever platform you're using. So you can actually contribute on the tutorials, and we're looking into then obviously giving you credits in the monthly calls, monthly PnP calls, and the video, and also within the pages. So whoever has contributed will get credits out of that one as well. Good. Let's move to the following slide. A few other stuff which have recently happened. So yesterday we released the existing tutorials as a videos as well. We know that there was some people were struggling on certain steps within those tutorials. So I recorded personally these 6 videos walking through the tutorials with the step-by-step guidance, what we have in the written format. So this one will help for anybody walking through the tutorials, and if they can follow up on the written thing, they can have a watch on the video, and then they can see what I'm actually doing to make that particular thing work. Or you can use these videos to learn and watch the videos and learn how to get started on SharePoint Framework, or you can use the videos as an, let's say, inspiration for your personal delivery on explaining somebody else what the SharePoint Framework is all about. And these are in the PnP YouTube channel, so we're moving into all of the video publishing to the YouTube. Right now, these are actually also in the old channel 9 channel of the PnP, where you can also download them down. But all of the recordings, video recordings, and all of that, bi-weekly office hours, this weekly call, all of that will be going to the YouTube. And that's really because the channel 9 actually doesn't scale for the amount of videos what we have, because we can't actually pinpoint. There's no playlists, there's no other edit capabilities within channel 9, which is a pity. We would love to be in channel 9, but we can't. So AKM SP PnP videos or SharePoint PnP videos, either way. This one I mentioned on the few slides before. So this went live yesterday around 9 p.m. Central European time, something like that. So we open up the SPDev FP web parts repository, and this will continue having more and more samples in the future. Right now it has the sample from a PnP webcast together with Waldec, which is showing the Angular integration together with SharePoint framework, and then there's a tutorial sample, which is essentially showing how those, what's the outcome if you build all of the tutorials as a SharePoint framework solution. and it has multiple web parts in one solution. So we're looking into expanding the sample section in here. There will be engineering contributed samples. There will be third-party community contributed samples in the future as well. One thing what we kind of are aware, and there's a ongoing discussion on that, there's a whenever you start doing SharePoint framework development and whenever you pull down dependencies of a single SharePoint framework solution, the storage requirements might be pretty big, and that's pretty natural in the web stack development, but that might actually freak out some people. And we're looking into reducing that storage requirement, but we also are looking into having, let's say, less samples, or which one sample is showing multiple things. So it's better to have one sample with multiple different web parts implemented in a different technology rather than having one sample for Knockout, one sample for React, one sample for Angular. So we're trying to kind of do more consolidated way of these samples. So we don't end up having hundreds and 120 samples, which all will take significant amount of storage if you do the npm install for all of them. Good. The next slide. This is something where I wanted to actually have everybody's input who are on the call. So you can use the iron window, or you can unmute yourself, and whatever you want. So we're looking into getting started training. We do have tutorials already. Tutorials are available in the dev.ops.com starting today and right now in the GitHub. But what we want to do is release a training package which anybody across the world can actually pull down, and they can deliver the SharePoint framework-oriented training within their location. So if you're a random, let's say, a Microsoft certified trainer in Ukraine, Singapore, Russia, or in Mexico, it doesn't really, or in Brazil, it doesn't really matter. You can pull down this package and deliver a local training. The obvious idea is that this way we can scale, and people are able to use the existing validated material, existing slides, so that not everybody has to rebuild the slides for every single session. And obviously, if you're an MVP, if you're a community member, you want to do some presentations, you can use all of those materials within your seminar deliveries as well. So, reusable IP. But the question is, what do we actually need? What kind of modules do we actually want to create? What do we want to do as a initial start for getting started training? And this is just a really, really rough start, which I wrote down. And I think somewhere I have a long list of these modules, but I wanted to give your input on the needed modules as well. The flow would be that we start by creating a client-side web part. So that module that's one module which will have a presentation, hands-on lab, demo, and a video recording. And the presentation for that module will obviously explain, this is the tooling, these are the options, this is what Gulp is doing, this is what Node.js is doing, and all of that stuff. And this is how you actually install the Yeoman template, and this is how you get started by creating an empty client-side web part. The next step is then talking to SharePoint, like in our existing tutorials. So, okay, I have this web part, how do I make it talk to SharePoint? So explaining the SharePoint Online version of Workbench, explaining the environment type variables and how to detect that and all of that stuff, and covering that first in a presentation, and then in hands-on lab having similar kind of exercise what we have in the tutorials. Then in the third module, explaining the editor pane options, so how we can extend the editor pane, what are the options, what is the reactive mode, what is the non-reactive mode, and how to control that within the web parts. And then having, again, building on the existing hands-on lab deliverables, building still that same web part, continuing expanding that. And then on the fourth stage, relatively, well, highly required operation, which is the CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete against the SharePoint. So having that web part, again, extended, that, okay, now we have the web part, it's already talking to SharePoint, good. We have the editor pane options, and now we need to actually do something with SharePoint lists, because typically web parts are talking to SharePoint lists. So let's create a module out of it, and let's create a slice for it, and walk that through. Now, the follow-up question is, what's missing? So what kind of other modules you would like to have within this kind of training package, which we then would be sharing for the community. And feel free to unmute yourself if it's, and obviously Waldek, Patrick, if you guys want to actually contribute at this point as well. The reason why I'm asking this in this call is that within relatively soon, within a few hours, I should have this list locked down. So I just wanted to quickly see if there's anybody with ideas. Or am I talking to myself and nobody's listening?
So to what extent would you like to include already tutorials, for example, for Angular, jQuery, Knockout, so different frameworks that people use? Because you have now on the screen are agnostic of framework, right? So the concept, you could basically apply the same concept differently in Angular, differently in Knockout, differently in Vue, in anything else. So would you like to have for the few most popular framework the whole set, or would you have specific sets for frameworks? How would you go around that?
That's actually a good point. So should we actually adjust the modules in a way that 1, 2, 3 would be pretty much the same, because they're pretty kind of a framework agnostic. And then we would have a CRUD operations with SharePoint with Angular, CRUD operations with SharePoint with React, CRUD operations with SharePoint with Knockout.
I would say that for 3, for editor pane, different frameworks might require a different way of how you pass properties from the apps and what we've seen in Angular. So perhaps we want to include that as well in the framework-specific list as well.
And Bill was about to say as well something.
No, Mike said it actually in the comments. To do MVC, which is like a standard example problem to compare different frameworks, you could also do that with the web part. I think Waldek already did one in the last webcast on Angular. I think that was actually to do MVC. So you could use that and then iterate that through all the different frameworks.
Yep, that's absolutely the idea. What I'm trying to do right now, and unfortunately I can't seem to see the discussion, which is weird. But it's just to kind of pinpoint the exact individual modules. So kind of combining that, your feedback would be that we would have editor pane and CRUD operations per technology. So the talk to SharePoint would be kind of a, hey, this is how you do the basic talking to SharePoint. Okay, now let's start actually doing this using React. Let's start now doing this using alternative options.
Yeah, Professor, I think also we need to have something in about search.
Yes, the search could be a one option. Absolutely, that's actually a good point. It could be a one module which is then explaining, let's say, more functionality related operations. So that would mean then that we would have edit, and I can't edit the slide which we're sharing unfortunately, but I'm editing this in my separate version. So editor pane and CRUD operations with SharePoint with React, and then a separate one with Knockout and Angular.
Well, actually, those would be the same, wouldn't they? So that presumably you'd abstract away the bit that interacts with SharePoint. So you could, you wouldn't need to do a matrix of every possible framework and then every possible way of talking to doing the CRUD operations with SharePoint, because there'll be a few of those, won't there? There'll be like Ajax would be one way, PnP framework would be another, perhaps CSOM or JSOM would be another.
And also an interesting thing would be, so for example, Paul, in Angular, would you use the Angular HTTP service, or would you use the client that you get from the web part? Right.
But that's then inside of the Angular module, wouldn't it? Right.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yes, but that goes also about the fact whether you have CRUD operations per framework or just one set that's agnostic, and then we apply exactly the same, or we are able to apply exactly the same in React, Angular, Knockout, and everywhere else.
Yeah, well, the difference is React and Knockout don't really have an opinion about how to do your HTTP requests, whereas Angular does.
Yes. Yeah. There was also another comment about a module on Office UI Fabric. So how do we build web parts that look great?
Oh, by the way, since I'm missing the modules, I'm going to actually reconnect. So because this is now killing me because I can't see the comments. So I'll be right back within 10 seconds. Sorry for this.
We're definitely not editing this part out either.
No, so
now we can talk about Vesa.
Yes. No, I'm back. So now I can see Mike's comments. I can't see the previous comments, but I can see Mike's lol comments, which is good. Ruffle. I'm currently rolling on the floor. Anyway, Office UI Fabric. Let's add that one in the list of modules. Using Microsoft Graph via search.
Yeah, so there was a question about the Office Graph, and I asked whether through the Microsoft Graph or search.
Well, right. Yeah, sorry.
I was just letting you know I reposted my comment since you couldn't see it.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
I think also it needs to be an architectural question about whether some of this stuff goes into the the Office Dev PnP JavaScript library, or whether it should go into the client web part.
Yep, and I would say that so right now what we want to do is concentrate on really on a getting started level. So many of you guys in this call, you are, how would I put it? You are slightly more advanced on understanding when we're talking about concepts of SharePoint framework. We need to be realistic. Majority of the SharePoint developers across the world are not. So we need to kind of give them the guidance on, okay, so how would I actually get started? Now, all of this architectural thinking and design thinking and all of that, we would postpone that to the advanced training, which would be delivered slightly later. We right now need to have the getting started training, and it's amazing that it doesn't exist at this point.
So how about in which bit it would go a training about what do you need to do to actually deploy the web part to production? Or like to run an optimized build, to bundle stuff, or exclude stuff, all of that.
Yeah, so the deployment to production, which is essentially we can combine the app catalog and CDN discussion and all of that to that. Yeah, that's a good module as well, like we have in the tutorials.
It might be that you can't cover every possible framework in every situation, so perhaps you do simple examples using all these different frameworks to show this is how you can use Angular and this is how you can use Knockout, and then maybe when you get to the more, then you need some more exotic samples that get more complicated, and at that point maybe you need to take a view as to, okay, this is the horse we're betting on, so maybe you have to say, for example, these more advanced samples will use React, and they'll use PnP, JS Core, and they'll use Office UI Fabric, perhaps,
which is absolutely fine, and good input, Bill, for the sample selection, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create modules and training modules and reusable presentations. So I would absolutely be able to create a simple CRUD operations samples for Angular, React, Knockout, and certain things, and then more complex stuff for chosen platforms, which makes a lot of sense. Those samples will be coming, and they're in the queue.
But the training modules, you'll also want to be sort of upping the ante as you go through, by
True.
Episode 10, you might be doing something quite sophisticated.
Yes.
And at that point, you might have to say, well, we can't cover all of these different things in parallel. We're going to focus on, this is the tooling that we recommend, and kind of come up off the fence a little bit if that's what you need to do. And say, and we'll focus on that now to do this much more exotic example that we want to do in our series of training modules, while acknowledging that you could use other technologies, of course, to do the same thing.
Yeah, true. True, absolutely agree on that. So the long-term vision around the training package is that we start by having, let's say, 5 or 6 modules with presentation, hands-on labs, demos, and videos. But it doesn't stop there. What we want to do is that we will end up having, let's say, 30 modules. And then you, as a person who want to consume that training package, if you want to consume that as I want to teach, you can choose which of them you want to watch. Many of them are completely isolated, so you can actually watch them in the right order you want. Or if you want to deliver a training or a seminar talk or to explain what is SBFX for your customer, you can go to the selection of modules, and then you can see, hey, customer was asking me about how do I actually do Office UI Fabric and what does it actually mean, and they wanted to understand from Microsoft Craft together within the context of SharePoint Framework. So therefore, I'm going to take that, and that module, and then you're good to go. So we would have this truly reusable set of fine-tuned, polished presentation. And by the way, our marketing people are on board on all of this thinking. So they will be fine-tuned, they will be the official training packages, they will be the right stuff. You can choose, obviously, create your own presentations and additional slides if you want. But you would have an official blessed set of slides, which you can use to deliver the story. So there wouldn't be kind of a yesterday, Bill did a great session on together with Rancor on around the SBFX, and then, hey, that's a great slide. It would be really cool if I could actually use the slide. And the idea is that you can. All of the slides, all of the material, all of the IP is available for you. So you don't actually have to take a screenshot of Bill's cool slide and rebuild that. And you can just download that from one location. You're good to go. Which will save everybody's time.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Maybe one of the, I say probably Voldeck, but one of these modules
it was
probably
Bill,
to
It was
focus.
Actually Bill Bear, anyway.
Oh, Bill Bear, right. Yeah, one of these should probably focus on a responsive UI and perhaps using Office UI Fabric to achieve that. But, you know, for people who are consuming these web parts using a mobile device.
Yeah,
so the device.
That's true. Right now, I would actually wait just to be, let's say, straightforward, honest and transparent with that. I would wait for a while to make sure that the SharePoint is getting truly responsive as well. So right now we're in a kind of a transition phase, even after yesterday's announcements on the new SharePoint collaboration side experience, because yes, you need to think about certain things, but if you build your stuff using SharePoint Framework, it will be natively responsive in the modern pages. So
yes, but you still need to do a little bit of work if you want to make it behave the way you want it to behave, you know, and using the appropriate CSS selectors and things that the UI Fabric provides.
True. True. Okay, anyway, I think we covered within here. We want to do a demo still today, or somebody wanted to still say.
Bessa, one more thing. In the editor pane option, shouldn't there be something in there about validating properties?
Validating the editor pane, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Vardhiman from UK did a good blog post on that one already, so that's absolutely the idea. So right now, what I'm thinking, and I updated on my slide because I can't update that slide, unfortunately. Create slides, create client-side web part would be one module, talk to SharePoint, another one, editor pane option. I would still keep it as a separate module where we explain the validation option, how to do that, and then the individual controls and all of that stuff. And I know that there are small differences on that one depending on our technology, and we can extend that slightly later. But then I would concentrate on creating CRUD operations with SharePoint, 3 modules, one with Angular, one with React, one with Knockout, and maybe one without any framework, I don't know. So that we would have those, let's say, the presentation for it and technology-specific details around what does it mean in React, how do you actually do that. And that would also concentrate on the presentation layer. This is how you do the presentation layer in React. This is how you do the presentation layer in Angular, or the difference is. Office UI Fabric, no doubt, own module. It has to be covered. We need to understand the options, what does it actually provide, and all of that. It's actually a pity that they don't have their own training package. They should. And then one module around the deployment to production. And this would be the getting started. There was good input, which you guys already gave around the additional steps.
Do we also need one about testing? Because there is a test included out of the box within the web part, but there is no guidance how to use that.
Fair. Yep, I'll add that one on a list, but I would still add that one as a bonus. I do understand testing is super important, and we need to still start by teaching people to write the stuff, and then they can start doing testing. They should go to tests at the same time when they implement the stuff, but that's a fair point. Cool.
Dude, it's test first. Come on.
Yes, let's create this methodology where people actually first create tests and then they implement the. Wait a minute.
Okay, no time to debate that.
Yeah, let's not start that. Cool. Okay, let's move on, Patrick, on the presentation. Thank you everybody for your contribution. This is a good discussion and gave some great ideas on the training package. I'm not going to do any demos on this one, and no point walking through the repos and all of that. So let's move Patrick on the JavaScript core library side, and then we can hopefully do 2 demos. This is a leftover from last week. I do apologize. But there will be additional opportunities to contribute on the SBFX as well.
So the JavaScript core component still out there, still exists. You can see the links down at the bottom. We're going to continue developing this. Things are fairly stable. There are some issues out there, which we'll talk about in a second. Thank you again to everybody that's contributed on this in the past. We got one new name on there, John Liu. So thanks to John, we got a couple of fixes in there, and there's a few more pending. Want to real quick, we had a question on the batch.execute. It itself does not return a promise, so you don't actually know when all your entire batch is finished. So we're going to update that for 1.4 and return a promise there. I think that was a great idea. And there was a question on typing the results of your get call, which is something we had talked about, I don't know, way long ago whenever that got added to the library. So tried to answer that as best I could. That was on Gitter. And if that's still unclear, please do just keep asking. So weekly stand-up, 104 is going to go out today. I've actually blocked out time for that today. So there's some great small fixes. There's a couple pull requests that I merged this morning, and there's a couple I'm going to look at this afternoon, as well as a couple other small fixes I'm going to do. But we'll get the 104 out today. So if you have any last-minute pull requests for that, you'll have till a little bit later this afternoon, my time there. And then just a note on the processing of the PRs and issues. I was away for a week, and then have been a little bit busy getting back through my emails, but catching up on those pull requests and issues, I'll do that this afternoon, and so everybody should get a response to the issues, not necessarily a fix today, but at least a response on what we're going to be doing there. So opportunities to contribute, pretty much unchanged, but again, write a web part, demo that on this call. We've got 2 demos we'll get into right now. So, who wants to go first, Bill or Waldeck?
I'm ready if I can figure out how to screen share. That's the only thing that could go wrong.
Technology is difficult.
I'm using the web client, which...
now you're asking control.
Yeah.
Should be just share.
Right, so I've got a little client-side web part here. I'll just show you what it does. So it says this is my site title, and if I change, I've got my this is the edit panel open here. So if I change this to name of, so it's a reactive control, and I can show the username, or I can not show the username. I can show the lists that I've got on the site. This is actually some dummy data, which I'm rendering at the moment, which is flagged up by this. And then if I lose the web part control, and if I just refresh this, actually, just start I've done a couple of things on here just to give it a bit of interaction. So there's a spinner control here, and I can dismiss it with this button. So it's just to demonstrate a bit of interaction. So that's in the SharePoint workbench running locally. I've also got a copy of it running in my developer tenant. Again, I've got the dismiss gratuitous spinner, except I need to refresh this actually. I've also got a panel that comes up here if I click on this. So this is an Office UI Fabric panel, and I've got my username, which now makes sense here. And if I show the lists, so if I edit show lists, it will actually, that's a bug, it will actually show a list of all the lists in my site, and that's all being fetched using the PnP JS core. So how does this work behind the scenes? So if I go to Visual Studio Code, as maybe I maximize that. So I've created a React web part, and if I go to site info webparts.ts TypeScript, you can see that it in its render method, it actually calls this React create element and then creates a site info web component. And if I go to components, you can see that there's a site info TypeScript file. Actually, it's a TSX file. So if you look in the render method of this, so if you're not familiar with React, it will look a bit strange because it returns a div and some more what look like HTML elements, and they're not wrapped in quotation marks. They're just elements in there. How can this be? Well, this isn't a TypeScript file, it's a TSX file, so there's a pre-compiling step. Well, there's already one anyway because it's TypeScript, but it's also using the JSX compiler, which is now built into the TypeScript compiler in some way, and it goes through, and when it sees something that looks like an element, it actually calls something like, it calls the structure it generates some JavaScript, which is something like React create element div or something like that. And when it sees the curly braces, the compiler knows that it has to switch to just plain JavaScript mode, and so it then spits out just regular JavaScript. And it can switch back and forth. So this isn't really a templating engine like you'd have in something like Handlebars. What's happening here is this is actually emitting JavaScript. The whole thing is emitted as JavaScript. So it takes a little while to get used to, but it means I can then incorporate things like the Fabric button. So here I've got Office UI Fabric React. Now I've pulled in everything here. I've got an import star as Fabric. What you'd probably want to do for production is something like list all the elements that you want here and say import and then a list of what you want from Office UI Fabric. But I've just been lazy just for this demo and use star as Fabric, and then I can create one, and I get IntelliSense as well. You know, so if I type in here Fabric dot, it'll well, not in this case, but anyway, it would normally give IntelliSense. Maybe I have to do it in here. Fabric dot, and you get a list of all the things that you can pick. So it's quite a handy way if you're not sure exactly what all these things are called. So I've got a Fabric button and a Fabric panel, for example, here. So these are the Office UI Fabric React controls that they've built for us. So it means I can, using very little code, generate these things, and that will generate more HTML behind the scenes. So what React does is it then generates this virtual DOM of these elements and then diffs it against the actual live DOM, and that's why the whole thing's very efficient. So I don't need a data binding engine. I can just ensure that this render method is called again every time that that any content changes, rather than excuse me, two-way data binding where you're kind of chasing around figuring out what affects everything else. So it ends up being very efficient. So then what I've also, so now I complained earlier, I think a couple of weeks ago, about there's too much in the Hello World sample. In this case, I've gone to the other extreme and tried to use everything. So I've got React, I've got Office UI, Fabric, React, and I've also pulled in Patterns and Practices JavaScript core, JS core. So I've got import star as PnP from SP PnP JS. Now, before I did that, I had to do a npm install -- save, and it's sp-pnp-js. And that goes off to, I think, npmjs.org and gets whatever the latest package that Patrick has uploaded into there will get picked up. So the only slight fly in the ointment there I found was that there was a dependency on node fetch. So if you get the current version, it thinks there's a dependency on node fetch module. There isn't, but it's there. It's supposed to know not to, that it's not required, but there was a typo in the bit that in this setting. It's actually under node modules. You can do a fix here if you go to node modules and then go down this fairly long list. And what am I looking for? It's SP PnP.js, and if you go into package.json, that file, there is a fix there. You need this extra line here, which will tell us that if you're running in the browser, you don't need the node module, the node fetch client module.
So everybody knows that fix will be included in 104, so this patching step Bill's talking about here should no longer be needed once we get the new version out this afternoon. So thanks to John
awesome.
For that fix. Yeah,
John Liu, yeah.
Yep, so that should be taken care of this afternoon for folks.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's excellent news. Oh, I needn't have bothered. I could have just glossed over that. I didn't realise. I had a feeling it might not be it might be in next month. So yeah, John Liu spotted that typo, and did a pull request. So what am I doing here? I've sort of lost track of where I am a bit here. So yeah, I'm in source web parts. I was in site info to TSX. Yes. So then we've got PnP. So again, you probably just import the classes that you needed specifically. But I've imported everything, so I can just call PnP, and again I get IntelliSense here, which will help me, which is nice. So I can PnP SB web get, and then I've got a callback, and I don't know why it's the TS lints, the kind of TypeScript nitpicker engine says you have to choose a lambda expression here. So this is actually just equivalent to typing function results. If you're a JavaScript developer, you do it like that. But we do it that way because it's much cooler to use a lambda. And then you can set it really easy. You just say set state. So I've got some state, which I like to think of as like the view model of the components that you're running. So you can have each of these web components has a state, and we set the state and we set the title to result.title. And then I've got another one here. I suppose we could batch these, but this one typically returns quite a bit faster than this one. This is a little bit slow, and this gets all the lists. And then I've used a mapping function to make me a list of just the titles, and I could improve this this query and just return the title or something like that. But I was just lazy, and then set the state of lists to lists, and that's basically how it works. And I've used a few bits of UI fabric and some gratuitous extra buttons and things just to show how the interaction works and how you can click something and make something change on the screen. And we've got various little conditionals here. So again, the JSX compiler knows to flip into JavaScript mode when it sees the curly braces, and will evaluate this test here and emit either this warning running locally with mock data using one of the Office UI Fabric classes there. You've just got to be careful with the thing I usually forget in React is I use class instead of class name. This, unfortunately, class would be a conflict with the TypeScript class, so they had to call the class attribute on the HTML elements class name, and if you get that wrong, nothing works. So that, and that's how it works. You know, got some various things. You know, when we click on things, it will call these methods and change the state, and when the state changes, everything just re-renders. But because it uses this React diffing engine between the virtual DOM and the actual DOM and only updates the elements, so it intelligently updates the elements that need updating, this makes it very efficient and a lot faster than that. Two-way binding tends to get quite sluggish as you add more complexity, but this seems to work very efficiently. So, you know, we've got 80 lines of code. You have used the UI fabric to really give us quite a lot of what will be rendered output without having to create a lot of code ourselves. I think this is particularly pleasing using the JS core library, because, you know, we're not having to involve ourselves with building HTTP requests and deciding what headers to set and so on. You know, that's all. Those now all boil down to one-liners when we're interacting with SharePoint. So, you know, that's at least three bits of technology on top of SharePoint framework, making it a lot easy and very concise. I don't know if you're interested.
I think, Bill, we need to give the Waldeck also
time to
do a demo as well. So just a reminder.
Well, I think that's pretty much it. I've put this onto GitHub if anybody wants to dig around into this code.
You probably should be pasting in the URL to the ION
I will do that. Yeah, I'll do that in a few seconds. Yeah, and
I have to say, Bill, I'm slightly mind blown that you switched the Visual Studio Code to white, because typically people are moving to black because everybody wants to be cool. But obviously you're a SharePoint doctor, so
to be honest, Vesa, that boat sailed a long time ago.
Yeah.
Being cool, I mean.
Yeah, fair.
I'm not. My children won't allow me to say the word cool. It's forbidden.
Cool.
Yeah, cool, but not cool.
But let's just from a timing perspective.
There's a lot there, though. Anyway, there's a lot in the web part for very little code. Is what the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch to Waldeck, if Waldeck can actually start to sharing as well. And Waldeck's going to show React-based web part. We're probably not going to do a deep dive on this one, but just to have a look on certain things on that. Right, Waldeck?
We can go as deep as you want.
Well, how deep can you go in 9 minutes? So.
Dude, I can talk really fast if I want to. All right, so here we go our questions. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Got it, at least.
I can see it.
Yep.
All right. All right, so what you see here is a web part that I built using React that uses the Office graph to show documents trending in this site. If you go to the settings, you can pick how many documents you want to see. So you can choose from 5, you can go to 3, you can choose 2, and I basically set the limit between 1 and 10. So with the Spinner, you can easily use the foolproof way for its user to easily pick the number of documents they want to show. and documents running in this side are being shown using the document card control that we get from Office UI Fabric React. So with that, let me show you how that's built. And all of the code that you will see is available on GitHub. I will share with you the URL. I also have a blog post explaining that all of that in more depth. So you don't need to take any notes, screenshots, or all of that. All of that will be available. And I assume that we're recording this, right? So you can even go on towards it. Yeah. All right. So going to the code, we have the web part. And in the web part, as you have seen, we define one property, so let me go to manifest, that defines the number of documents that we want to show, right? So if we go to the web part's code, and not much is going on here, except for the fact that we define the property, the number of documents that we want to use slider for that, which is here, and we set the minimum number to 1, maximum to 10, and step to 1. And then we pass the value to our React component. So the web part itself doesn't really do much, right? It provides the, let's say, framework for actually React to do all the work. If you look closely at properties that we actually use two of them. One of them is the number of documents that we want to show, but another one is actually the URL of the site for which we want to show the list of trending documents. And you've seen that we don't ask the user to type it in, right? Because we know where the web part is placed, so we can get that URL from the context where the web part is at. And we use that by calling the this context page context web absolute URL. So we use that URL and we pass that from the web part to React. And does that make sense so far? All good? Crickets. I assume it's good.
All good. All good.
All right. All right.
At least Waldek, I got it, so that's good.
Excellent. All right. So, and I can assume you can monitor for me the IM, right? Because I'm presenting, so I'm not looking at that. But if there is anyone there,
yep,
feel free.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and if there's anyone who would like to know anything, either use IM or ping me afterwards. So if we go into React, there are quite a few things going on here. So first we define some properties here, and we define our interface that actually models the document that we are going to show on a page. And for that, we need everything that we want to show on a card. So we need document's title, its URL, preview image URL, less modified photo, and all of that. So we need all of that because all of that is being shown on a card. And we get all of that from Office Graph using search. Initially, when we load the web part, we set initial state. And there are actually, when you work with React, there are two things to take into account. There are properties and state, right? So properties are the things that you get from the parent, and state expresses actually the current state of your component. So here we say we have actually three things that we take into account. We can either have the list of trending documents, we can be loading them, or we can have error. So these three state properties express the different states that our web part might be in, right? So we said that whenever we create component, we set that initially to empty array of documents. We say that it will load them, and we set the error to null, right? Because there's initially no error. Whenever we add the web part to the page, we start by loading the content, and for that we use the URL of the site and number of documents. And the way this works, it's pretty complex stuff, because if you think about how the Office Graph works, in order to go from a URL of a site to the list of trending documents in the site, there are quite a few steps that you have to take into account. So first of all, the first thing that you need is to get the list of members of that site, because Office Graph is all about the users. So you first need to get that. And if you think about it, that list can be really big, right? So we start with that, and then we need to get these emails, because these are emails, we need to convert them to Office Graph actors. And we use that with search, but because that list can be bigger than what we can fit in a GET request, we have to use POST. And all of that is on search, but for POST, we need to have the request digest that we get initially here. From the actors, we can go to trending content in a site, and then eventually we show that on a page by updating the state. So if we say we set the state initially to an empty array, and then for every document we update the state by adding another document to the page, which will basically repaint component on a page and will show documents. And then eventually we set that the loading is done, we finished, and all of that is shown. So with that, you can see how we can go from setting a property on a page all the way down to how to load the content using the, on one hand, properties that we got from the web part, and on the other hand, information such as the URL of the site that we get from the context of where the web part is placed. Eventually, one more thing that you might want to see is how we render it on the page, and we render that using the document card component from Office UI Fabric React. So here we have the render method, and which is really compact, right? For the amount of stuff that we show on the page, it's really small. So what we do here is we have our states, so the holding state, which is the part that we render whenever the web part loads. Then there's another state that we show whenever the web part errors out. And then there's a list of our documents that we show whenever we get the documents, right? And for each one of those, we render document card, to which we render the document card preview with image, title, activity about the author, and all of that. And finally, we return all of that to the page. And here, even though you see all three states that we return them back, only one of them has value, because if you look closely at it, depending on the state, if we load the page, it will have spinner, but otherwise it will be just an empty div. And the same applies to error. It will be either error or an empty div, or our list of documents will be either an empty div or a list of cards. All right, so based on that, we can just have really simple return that encapsulates all of our states. So with that, I will share with you links to my article, to the source code, and you will be able to explore all of that by yourself. And with that, I give it back to Vesa and Patrick to wrap up.
Thanks, Waldek.
Sure.
And I'm just looking under Patrick's microphone. Maybe I'll wrap it up. There's no point actually switching the slides anymore. At this point, we're hitting the 1 hour mark. Hopefully, you find the new format suitable. So absolutely give us feedback on the format. But I think actually now that the SharePoint framework is growing, there will be new stuff actually released almost every single week. We want to pinpoint some stuff. We want to cover some stuff. So having a weekly call, which is getting recorded and explaining what's actually coming and what's happening, is probably highly beneficial. And then obviously not forgetting about the JavaScript core library, which is a great community effort, like Bill actually showed within his section within the demo. So only with few lines of code you were able to get access on SharePoint data in an extremely easy way. But I think that's it. Any last words, Patrick, from your side?
Thanks, everybody. Great demos. Appreciate it, Bill and Waldek. Talk to everybody next week.
Sure.
And feel free to suggest if you have anybody else on the call have demos which you want to show or something. We'll figure out some additional demos, if nothing else, if we don't have additional things coming from the community. But I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Bye.